Justice Committee reconvenes today. They will be voting on the committee report that contains the consolidated impeachment case against the Vice President. What are you expecting?
Well, we're actually expecting it to approve today, maybe subject to certain amendments. Of course, I don't want to speculate, but we're definitely expecting it to be approved today. And I think I've already heard statements that they're scheduling this to be transmitted to the plenary for voting sometime May 11, if I'm not mistaken. But of course, that's subject to change, and that's within the discretion of the House.
All right. Now, you've heard, I want to ask you, certain sectors saying that there's not enough votes. Some have said there's more than enough. There's more than 106 to impeach her. What are your thoughts on this?
Alam nyo, ma'am, napakahirap kasi mag-speculate kasi you're right, no? Just a few days ago, there were statements saying walang votes. I mean, not enough votes at least. And then just a few, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, now they're saying that there are enough votes. Sa atin naman, whatever happens, we're just ready for it. Of course, again, we maintain our objections dito sa mga proceedings na naganap sa House Committee on Justice, with all the respect, of course, to the members of the committee. But we all know that it's all about numbers at this point. So whatever happens in plenary, we'll just be monitoring the developments and we'll react accordingly.
Okay, Attorney Powell, looking back, couldn't the team have cooperated more? The results could have been different, they said, if the Vice President actually attended. She had a seat at the House Justice Committee. Does the team regret not participating completely with the proceedings?
Just to answer your question directly, no, we do not regret what we did, precisely because our objections were fundamental and constitutional, no, dito sa naganap na proceedings. Now, if I can just explain further, there's always been this notion that if the Vice President showed up, she could have defended herself, etc. And in fact, we've seen at several instances, the camera pans and zooms on an empty chair, hindi ba? But then, practically speaking, number one, kung wala naman we filed the petition before the Supreme Court, we had to be consistent with our position on our objections to the conduct of these proceedings, or at least the nature or the manner it was conducted. Secondly, ngayon, let's say we were to participate, even as just a defense team, hindi naman kami makapag-participate dun kung wala ang respondent, hindi rin naman kami makapag-test ng credibility through cross-examination dun sa mga witnesses na present. Thirdly, and I think that this is another important point that we haven't really discussed fully. For example, if the Vice President actually attended those hearings, as you know, they presented certain witnesses like Mr. Ramil Madriaga, AMLAC, etc. We were never given advance copies, no, of those reports or presentations, or even the supplemental affidavit of Mr. Madriaga. Now, in that instance, after the presentation of the witness, they would now ask the Vice President to present her evidence and rebut whatever was said. But the thing is, how can we effectively rebut anything that was said on the spot without even having studied these documents? Precisely because we were never furnished copies of these documents before the hearing itself. Just to be fair to the House, they did furnish us copies, no, of these documents after the hearing. But then again, practically and legally speaking, how can one intelligently respond to all these allegations made when, we never got any advance copies of these documents for us to study them and have an intelligent response?
Okay, now it's a given that it was called a mini trial, but it was not a trial per se. In effect, the proceedings were essentially aimed at just solidifying grounds for probable cause. And it is true, the threshold for probable cause, hindi naman mataas yun, mababa lang ang threshold nun. Given the fact that the House Justice Committee said they followed and they were very careful with the conditions set by the Supreme Court, do you agree that they followed the requirements of the Supreme Court?
You know me, ma'am, Miss Karen. I've been very fair, you know, especially with my commentaries. Even if I'm in the defense team, we do recognize that there were instances when even Chair Luis Tro would even stop, diba, certain members from asking probing questions. But our problem really here is more on the complaints themselves, 'di ba? Kasi yung complaints, and aminin natin, walang naka-attach doon ng mga documents. So for example, their claim on the SALN and the ill-gotten wealth, walang naka-attach. And our position is if we were to determine probable cause, no, normally, dapat ang naging evaluation is on the complaint, allegations therein, plus the pieces of evidence that were attached. But here, obviously, these documents were not attached, and these documents were obtained through compulsory processes, not by the complainants, but by the Committee on Justice itself. No? Sila yung nagsubpoena for these documents, and when these documents came in, 'di ba? Hindi na kasi galing sa complainant 'yon. That was even after the fact that we had
And
filed our answer.
you find that questionable in nature because the characteristic of the House Justice Committee is essentially prosecutorial, right? In fact, even if it's meant to be a fair proceeding, their character is prosecutorial because they might be the prosecutors once this get to the Senate. 'Di ba? Parang mali ba yun na sila ang nagsabina ng ebidensya?
Para sa amin po, number one, let's also recognize that under their rules, they do have compulsory power, no, to issue these subpoenas. However, our position is, since sila na rin nagsabi, clarificatory yung nature ng mga hearings na ito, sana man lang yung mga pinanggalingan ng subpoena ay based on already evidence or pieces of evidence that were attached to the complaints. Iba kasi yung walang naka-attach, so then it makes you question, ano yung naging basihan ng mga
Mm,
allegations kung wala mang kopya ng kahit anong dokumento ang naka-attach dito.
mm,
Secondly, these were again subpoenaed only after we have
mm.
filed our answer and after the complainants have waived their opportunity to file a reply. Usually kasi wala namang problema mag-introduce ng additional documents ang complainants. That's why sa preliminary investigation, for example, may filing ng complaint, diba? And then we file our counter affidavit and then they can file the reply and even strengthen their case. However, in this case, iba kasi yung nangyari. Pag tapos na lahat ng filing ng responsive pleadings, dun lang ngayon nagsubpoena ng mga documents. And again, we were not even furnished copies. For example, the supplemental affidavit po of Mr. Ramil Madriaga. I think we all have to also recognize na sobrang layo niya dun sa original affidavit, no? I'm not saying that these are things that we will not respond to in case this goes on to trial. Of course, we will respond, but that is the position of the defense. Again, ito naman talagang issue na po na to is highly politically charged, highly divisive. So I would like to respect that the Committee on Justice as well as the complainants will have their position. Kami naman sa defense, we're just stating also our theory and our position on the matter.
Well, the impeachment trial is both it's both evidentiary and it's also both political. We know that, right?
Opo.
So I'm sure you've studied past impeachment cases, right? The late Chief Justice Renato Corona essentially was convicted, and what was discovered in the trial was his 200 million peso or more. I'm not sure if it reached 600, but I remember 200 million pesos in a bank account that was then he was questioned why it was not declared in his SALN. So there are pieces of evidence that come to light when it already reaches the trial.
Yes.
What was wrong, essentially, you felt, what was lacking in what was submitted to the House? Because it was quite detailed, many people felt.
Opo. Number one, ang posisyon naman po namin dito is, again, what was quite detailed was procured not by the complainants but by the Committee on Justice. And for us, the function of the Committee on Justice is really to determine probable cause. And again, you're correct in saying that the threshold naman po is not that high in terms of
Mm,
probable cause. But sa atin, when you evaluate if a complaint Thus, if you can find probable cause in the complaint that was filed, you have to evaluate the complaint itself. It cannot
Mm,
be the Committee on Justice doing the job for the complainants to
mm,
actually procure all these pieces of evidence. Ibang usapan kasi po pag nasa trial eh. Why? Because sa trial, we recognize even the bank secrecy law, the bank exception is cases of impeachment. So that can actually be subpoenaed in trial, no?
mm,
However, that being the case, in trial, we at least have the opportunity to cross-examine and test the credibility of these witnesses. Now, if you have a certain, for example, again, and I'm sorry I have to keep on mentioning his name, but Mr. Ramil Madriaga, who
mm,
presented a supplemental affidavit. And in that instance, we could not have even had the opportunity to test the credibility. In fact, even congressmen who wanted to ask and test the credibility were sort of,
mm.
prevented from